So from in-house, now we go to another meteorologist, Jarard Johnson, to share the impact of Hurricane Ida. Thank you for joining us, sir. So the hurricane wreaking damage on Louisiana. How are you, as a meteorologist, reacting to the images you're seeing?
You know, unfortunately, they're images that we expected to see as this storm intensified. It intensified very quickly, and we watched that as it was traveling slowly over the Gulf of Mexico, which made us know that it was going to be very intense once it reached landfall. So we expected this, but it's always difficult to watch it when it actually happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also covered Katrina 16 years ago. What makes this storm so unique in comparison?
So this storm had a more powerful punch. It was more condensed. Katrina was a larger storm. It had a more expansive wind field to it, right? This storm was more compacted, but it packed heavier winds. And so with that said, you had damage area that was bigger in Katrina, but heavier wind damage and things with this storm right here. So both kind of similar. In fact, they made landfall just within about 50 miles of each other in terms of area. So it was eerily very similar to Katrina. It's just that Katrina was a larger mass of a storm.
And right now we're looking at video of some of that damage. I mean, it's just horrendous to think that people actually
Yeah.
lived here to what it looks like right now. It's just completely destroyed. Roofs ripped off. I mean, boats turned over. It just talks, and we're watching the storm surge right now from that water, just so powerful. Can you talk about what some folks experienced that actually were unable to leave just because they were financially unable to do so? What did they experience?
I mean, catastrophe. You know, that there's no easier way to put it than catastrophe. When you have storm surge anywhere between 12 and 17 feet high, which is basically, in layman's terms, a wall of water rushing ashore, there's really nothing you can do to really prepare for that if you have to stay there. Then on top of the fact that you have down power lines, which causes a bunch of conductors all around you, because we all know water is a conductor of electricity. So you have down power lines, which makes it unsafe to go anywhere where there's water, or you have to be extra careful. Then of course you have the winds and 150-mile-an-hour winds. Just so you're aware, that's enough wind to tear the roof off of a building. That's a tornado force wind, and it's constant and sustained. So catastrophe is the only word that you can use.
And talk about somebody who may weigh 153 pounds. If they just say, hey, I want to just walk out and experience this one, what would they actually experience? Would they be blown away?
You'd be blown away. You'd have to really, really brace yourself. And even then, you have to think about this. The force of wind is constant, right? You are one body of mass that's sitting there, but the wind continues to come and come and come. It doesn't have an end to it. So if you have 150-mile-an-hour winds, there you can't stand there and force it. That would be something that would only be possible in a movie.
All right, and Jarard, also I want to ask you, following Katrina 16 years ago yesterday, New Orleans invested over $14 billion on floodgates and levees. How did the system hold up?
I think it held up decently. I think it held up kind of to be expected. It definitely was. They were a lot more prepared for this one than they were with Katrina, which is why you haven't heard of the high deaths and things like that, which we're grateful for that. They did rebuild the city. They rebuilt the levees. They had, more advanced versions of them that were ready as you can possibly be for a storm like this. But again, a Category 4 storm with 150-mile-an-hour winds and 15-foot storm surge, it's very, very difficult to actually prepare for something like that. But I think they did a phenomenal job in rebuilding the city to make it stronger and make it more able to withstand as much of the storm as possible, which, again, you're going to have damage. You're going to have a lot of damage. It's going to be some time before we can decipher how much damage. But with all being said, they did a much better job with getting this place ready for this thing.
Well, that's a good sign, Jarard, because they faced other challenges like COVID, the
Right.
pandemic. Can you just talk about how surviving a hurricane amidst a pandemic, what are some of the challenges that the people who were impacted by this storm faced as they try to recover today?
Well, that's the thing about hurricanes that we try to make sure that everybody understands is the effects far outlast the actual life of the storm in most cases. I mean, they start from way before the storm gets there with the storm surge and the winds and things like that. Then you have the flooding, and then you have the after effects where you have continued flooding, but you have flooding of weakened areas, right? Because the storm has beat down the area so bad that it comes in with more flooding and more rain, and then now you have rescue efforts. And a lot of times, as in this case, it's very difficult to get to people if possible at all. on top of the fact that we're in a pandemic. And of course, you have people out there that either have COVID or are being exposed to COVID. And COVID is going to run rampant in this type of an environment because there's no way to keep you safe from it if the responders can even get to where you are, but you have this significant spread. So there's just a lot of things to deal with these type of storms. And we try to emphasize as much as we can that it's not about just the winds of the storm. It's about all of the effects of the storm, which last for days.
So let's talk about Jarard briefly before we have to take a commercial break. How can people stay safe post-hurricane? Because now, I mean, it's the rain and some of that flooding that they're impacted by, but they're still there. So how can they stay safe while still trying to ride this storm out?
I mean, the biggest thing is help each other. You know, if you had to stay there for whatever the reason was, help each other. You know, find your neighbors and just help to get to people, because first responders are going to have a very hard time getting to people, especially in a timely manner, because of the nature of the storm and the damage that it has caused. So I would just say, you know, team up together, help each other out. When you see somebody that needs help, help them. This is a very big time to bond together and become a very big extended family, because we all need each other right now in this moment. And that's the best thing that you can really do.
Well, Jarard, I can't wait to talk to you about more of this, because we have viewers that are watching. They've been unable to get a hold of their loved ones in the impacted area. So I just want to know whatever we can possibly tell them that they can possibly tell folks. Can you just tell us, get whatever you can in right now, sir, briefly. How can people listening, what can they say and do?
Listen, keep the faith, keep an optimistic approach, keep your energy where it needs to be, and make sure that you expound the energy onto the people next to you, because this is a very easy time to get discouraged, you know, and to lose belief and to lose faith. And this is not the time for that. This is the time where you've got to be as strong as you possibly can for not only yourself, but also your family and those around you. And we'll get through this. There's no such thing as a permanent storm, so we will get through this.
It's like the metaphor for life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you after the break. We'll have more on the impact of Ida.